Game rules. First, let's talk about the Culling game rules, because this thing is basically a legally approved death maze with paperwork. Every rule either pushes sorcerers into killing each other, or quietly sets a timer on their lives. If someone dies in the Culling game, odds are the rules did most of the work before the fight even started. First rule hits immediately. Once a person awakens a cursed technique, they have 19 days to declare participation at a colony of their choice. Kenjaku triggers these awakenings around midnight on October 31st, 2018, which gives players like Sumiki Fushiguro until roughly November 19th to step into the game. Anyone who hesitates, freezes up, or hopes the problem goes away is already gambling with their life. This rule exists to force action. Do nothing and the game punishes you for it. That punishment comes from Rule 2. Anyone who breaks the first rule gets hit with cursed technique removal. This is not idle transfiguration and not something you walk away from. Shoko Ieri believes it messes directly with the brain, and Tengen confirms the result is death. This rule is why refusal is not an option. Sorcerers cannot opt out, protest, or wait for help because the game removes them from existence if they try. Non-sorcerers without cursed techniques avoid this specific fate, but awakened players do not get that luxury. Rule 3 expands the kill zone. Any non-player who enters a colony instantly becomes a player. Step inside the barrier and the game owns you. Civilians already trapped inside the barriers at the start get at least one chance to leave safely, but once that window closes, anyone wandering in becomes valid prey. This turns colonies into accidental death traps. One wrong step and a normal person gets dragged into a sorcerer death match they never agreed to. Rule 4 explains how survival works. Players earn points by killing other players. That's it. No peaceful alternatives baked into the system since the game directly rewards death. If you want to stay alive long term, someone else has to die. So this rule keeps violence constant and unavoidable. Rule 5 decides how valuable that violence is. Killing sorcerers are worth 5 points. Non-sorcerers are worth 1 point. Player-registered cursed spirits count as 5 points as well. This creates a brutal incentive structure where strong sorcerers become high-value targets, while civilians turn into disposable point farming. Even mercy comes at a cost, because sparing someone means delaying your own progress towards survival. Rule 6 introduces the illusion of control. A player can spend 100 points to negotiate with the game master and add a new rule, excluding the value of their own life. Getting 100 points means killing at least 20 sorcerers or a horrifying number of civilians. Many players died chasing this milestone, either because they push themselves into impossible fights or because others hunt them once they get close. Rule 7 locks this system in place. The game master must accept any new rule as long as it does not have a long-lasting effect on the game. Furthermore, a player cannot remove any existing rule. This means bad rules stack forever. Even helpful rules come with hidden risks, and once they exist, everyone has to live with them. Rule 8 adds another execution timer. If a player's score stays the same for 19 days, cursed technique removal activates again. No points means no progress, and no progress means death. This rule kills passive players, injured players, and anyone hiding to recover. Even survival without killing becomes a losing strategy. Now, the barriers quietly make everything worse. When a player answers Kogane upon entering a colony, they get randomly transferred to one of 9 preset locations. Allies get split up immediately, ambushes become easier, and new players often awaken additional abilities under stress. Confusion alone gets people killed before they even understand where they are. The barriers also block normal movement and communication in strange ways. Leaving the colony is forbidden by the rules, and the barrier mechanics make escape impossible. Early on, Jujutsu High students feared that even adding a rule would not let them cross colonies. That fear proves valid until a player adds a rule that allows free movement across all colony borders. Before that, players die simply because they cannot reach allies, medical help, or safer zones. Next comes the added rules by players using their 100 points, and each one reshapes how death spreads. Rule 9 gives players access to information about other players, including names, points, added rules, and current colony. Hajime Kashimo adds this, and it turns the game into an open hunting board, where high point players become targets instantly. Hiding stops working, knowledge becomes a weapon, and being strong paints a massive target on your back. Rule 10 allows players to transfer points between each other, added by Hiromi Higuruma. This rule initially has a generous purpose, as it helps weaker players survive by having their stronger allies transfer their points to them, but this rule also creates exploitation. Strong players begin pressuring weaker ones into giving up points, and even alliances turn predatory fast since refusal often ends in death. Rule 11 was added by Megumi Fushiguro in his bid to save his sister, Sumiki. This additional rule allows players to leave the game by spending 100 points to invite a substitute. By applying Rule 10, Megumi and his allies transfer 100 points to Sumiki, who would use these points to leave the game by having Kiyotaka Ijichi as her willing substitute. Unfortunately, the plan backfires when Sumiki is revealed to be the vessel for an ancient sorcerer named Yorozu. Upon receiving the points, Yorozu added a different rule that allows players to cross all colony borders. This rule could enable her to search and reunite with Sukuna, but this also expands the battlefield massively. Powerful players can now hunt across colonies, and nowhere stays quiet for long. As of 9:09 p.m. on November 18, 2018, Kenjaku added a Rule 13 that freezes the roster. No new players can join anymore, so anyone still alive after this point is locked in until death or the end of the game. Kenjaku later adds Rule 14, revealing the end condition. The Culling game ends when all players die except him, Uraume, and Sukuna, who has ultimately possessed Megumi's body. This confirms the truth about the entire ritual. Almost everyone is meant to die, and survival is not the goal, selection is. Before his death, Kenjaku adds the last rule that hands control of the Great Merger to Megumi, who is actually Sukuna. This rule ensures that even the ending carries lethal consequences. No matter who pulls the trigger, every rule funnels players towards the same outcome: kill or die, act or die, stall and die.
Gamer Supps is an energy and nootropic formula designed to be a healthier, cheaper, and more effective beverage over energy drinks for gamers or the modern anime weeb on the go. Its blend of essential vitamins, caffeine, and nootropics provide a consistent boost with no jitters and no crash. It has 0 sugar, less than 1 carb, and less than 1 calorie per serving, so it's keto and diabetic safe. Plus, there's sugar-free options. I personally drink it all the time to be able to grind out these straight-to-the-point and informative videos for you guys, and they'll likely be the only sponsor you'll ever see on this channel. So help the channel stay mostly sponsor-free by clicking the link in our description, picking from the many tasty and uniquely named flavors on the website, and use our code ANIMEX at checkout to save 10% on your order. It would be a huge help for us. Also, pick yourself up a aesthetically interesting waifu cup while you're at it too. They're collectible. But anyway.
Reincarnated Sorcerers. One of the biggest threats you'll run into during the Culling game are the reincarnated sorcerers, since everyone is forced to fight each other anyway. These are people who have already lived, already mastered jujutsu, already died once, and came back with zero hesitation about killing again. Kenjaku brought them back because they know how to end fights fast. Some of those people were ancient sorcerers who willingly turned themselves into cursed objects. Those objects get swallowed by modern humans, turning their bodies into vessels. The original soul overwrites the host, and the ancient sorcerer returns in a fresh body with all their experience intact. For anyone caught in the same colony, this is basically running into a walking extinction event. Let's start with Hajime Kashimo, one of the clearest examples of how deadly this gets. Kashimo comes from around 400 years ago, and even back then, he lived for combat. By the time he meets Kenjaku, he's old, sick, and bored out of his mind. When he hears Sukuna was the strongest sorcerer in history, that's all he needs. He agrees to become a cursed object just to get one chance at that fight. When Kashimo reincarnates in the modern era, he wastes no time. He enters the Culling game in Tokyo No. 2 colony and immediately starts deleting players. In 12 days, he kills at least 40 people and becomes the first player to gain 100 points, and later becomes the first player to add a new rule by using 100 out of his accumulated 200 points. That alone tells you how dangerous he is. His cursed energy behaves like electricity, meaning every reinforced punch comes with a shock that tears through defenses. His real danger comes from how he manipulates charges. He can plant a positive charge on an opponent and keep the negative charge himself. When he releases it, the lightning always connects after the charge conditions are satisfied, and there's no domain involved. It just hits. The only downside is that he needs time to recharge afterwards, which is why most opponents never even survive long enough to notice the weakness. He fights using a staff that works like a lightning rod that stores and directs his energy. He mixes clean martial arts with brutal strength that can snap limbs when needed. And then there's his trump card, Mythical Beast Amber. This technique lets him convert cursed energy directly into electrical phenomena, faster brain signals for speed, sonic attacks through altered vibrations, and electromagnetic waves strong enough to vaporize objects. The catch is that it kills him once it ends, so he saves it for Sukuna alone. Anyone who runs into Kashimo during the Culling game is basically facing a sorcerer who does not care about survival. He cares about one fight. Everyone else is collateral. Next up is Ryu Ishigori, another reincarnated monster from the same era. Ryu holds the record for the highest curse energy output in history that Kenjaku straight up views him as a living artillery. Even after reincarnating, no one in the Culling game matches his raw output. He earns 77 points in 12 days inside the chaos of the Sendai colony, and he does it without burning himself out. His curse technique fires massive energy blasts from his pompadour, and his signature move, Granite Blast, is a concentrated beam strong enough to level multiple city blocks. What makes him terrifying is that he can output this power even without activating his technique. Domain expansion barely slows him down, and even after using it, he still has enough energy to keep firing. Takako Uro is another reincarnated sorcerer who turns the battlefield itself into a weapon. She comes from 1,000 years ago and once led an assassin squad for the Fujiwara clan. She gets betrayed in the past, framed, and executed, which explains her attitude. By the time of the Culling game, she already has 70 points. Her technique, sky manipulation, lets her treat the sky like a physical surface. She bends it, folds it, wraps it around herself, and uses it to redirect attacks. Defenses mean very little against her. Her signature move, then Icebreaker, sends shockwaves by striking the sky itself, blasting opponents through buildings without direct contact. Reggie Star shows how reincarnation does not always mean raw power, but it still kills people. His technique lets him recreate anything written on a receipt by burning it with cursed energy. Weapons, vehicles, fuel, even spa treatments. He fights using prep, tricks, and constant pressure. He racks up points by baiting players into his territory and overwhelming them. Iori Hazunoki is even worse to face. His technique lets him turn parts of his body into bombs. Teeth, eyes, anything. He quickly regenerates with reverse curse technique and keeps throwing explosives non-stop. Fighting him means dodging body parts flying at your face. Angel, on the other hand, represents a different kind of danger. Her technique, Extinguishment, erases curse techniques entirely. Barriers, seals, curse objects, all gone. Jacob's Ladder wipes out curses in a massive column of light, and anyone relying on techniques gets their curse energy nullified if they get caught. Meanwhile, Yorozu is reincarnation at its most cruel. She uses construction to create insect armor, weapons, and impossible objects. Her domain expansion introduces the True Sphere, an object with infinite pressure that destroys anything it touches. And then there's Ryomen Sukuna. If there's one way a sorcerer can die instantly in the Culling game, it's by running into the King of Curses at the wrong moment. Sukuna traces back to the Heian era, when Jujutsu was at its peak, and even then no one could kill him. He was still human back then, but his strength and cruelty earned him the title of the Disgraced One. Before dying, he makes a deal with Kenjaku and turns himself into a cursed object by splitting his soul into 20 fingers that grow stronger over 1,000 years. Once revived inside Yuji, even with limited power, Sukuna already operates on a different level. His curse energy reserves completely dwarf most sorcerers, and his innate technique, Shrine, is built purely for killing. Dismantle fires invisible slashes that cuts through targets at range, while Cleave adjusts itself to the durability of whatever it hits, making defense pointless. When he spreads these slashes outward, entire areas get shredded in seconds. His Divine Flame burns faster and hotter than top-tier fire techniques, and wipes out anything caught in its path. His domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine, is where survival drops to zero. Sukuna expands his barrierless domain directly into the real world, where it covers a massive radius. Everything within range gets sliced automatically by his Cleave and Dismantle attacks, and gets obliterated instantly by a Vow-enforced Divine Flame. And once he takes over Megumi's body, it gets worse. He gains the 10 Shadows technique, summons multiple Shikigami at once, and creates monsters like Merge Beast Agido that heal, strike, and overwhelm non-stop. But the biggest threat is Mahoraga. Sukuna controls its adaptation ability and applies it to himself. This lets him evolve his slashes to cut through space itself. By the time Sukuna goes all out in the Culling game, anyone near him risks instant death, total disintegration, or getting erased before they even understand what hit them. Awakened Sorcerers. Now let's get into Awakened Sorcerers, the people who were just living normal lives until Kenjaku flipped the switch and dropped them into the Culling game. These aren't ancient monsters from the Heian era, but are modern humans who snap, awake cursed techniques, and immediately become lethal. Kenjaku awakens these sorcerers by forcibly modifying their brains to unlock cursed techniques that were dormant or never meant to surface naturally. The scary part is how fast some of them adapt. Give the right person power at the wrong moment, and the result is a walking death sentence for anyone nearby. Some of them barely have experience, yet they are as equally deadly as reincarnated sorcerers. In fact, the second contestant to score 100 points early into the game is one of the awakened sorcerers of the modern world. We're talking about Hiromi Higuruma. Higuruma goes from defense lawyer to top-tier Culling game threat in a matter of days. His awakening comes from pure emotional collapse. Watching the justice system fail someone who is clearly innocent breaks something inside him. That moment triggers his technique, and Higuruma never looks back. By the time he enters Tokyo #1 colony, he already wipes out at least 20 players and collects over 100 points. He needed no mentor or formal training. He figures out cursed energy and barrier techniques just by observing how his own domain behaves. Deadly sentencing is what makes Higuruma terrifying. Once his domain expansion activates, fighting back becomes impossible. The domain forces a courtroom setting where Higuruma prosecutes and his Shikigami judgment judges. Physical attacks get cancelled instantly, and the trial begins whether the opponent likes it or not. Judgment pulls real crimes from the defendant's life. The defendant then gets one response, and Higuruma gets one chance to counter using evidence Judgment hands him after the response. Once the verdict drops, the punishment hits immediately. Confiscation alone can end most sorcerers. Cursed tools get stripped away, cursed techniques disappear, or cursed energy gets locked. If death penalty is added, Higuruma gains the Executioner's Sword. One clean hit kills the soul outright. Anyone who gets dragged into this domain with a criminal past is gambling with their life. One wrong answer means execution. Next up is Fumihiko Takaba, the most unpredictable awakened sorcerer in the entire game. Takaba doesn't awaken through rage or hatred. He awakens through insecurity, rejection, and a lifetime of failed comedy. His curse technique, Comedian, activates when he genuinely believes something is funny. When that confidence is locked in, reality bends to match the joke. That alone makes him deadly. He conjures an extremely durable paper fan that can deflect explosive attacks, cover his entire body with Ankake sauce to make any punch on him slip right off, moves faster than his enemies, and even heals his own injuries without using reverse curse technique. Even against a veteran ancient sorcerer, Takaba shuts down every attack without trying by bending reality to his comedic will, making his potential limitless. The real danger is that Comedian drags other people into its logic. Opponents react based on what Takaba finds funny, not what makes sense in combat. Even high-level sorcerers struggle because their own thoughts feed into the technique. Kenjaku himself admits that he can't fully account for Takaba. Centuries of planning mean nothing when reality follows punchlines instead of rules. Takaba's weakness, though, is his confidence. Once doubt creeps in, the technique collapses. But when Takaba regains clarity and commits fully to his goal, the technique reactivates at full force. Special grade cursed spirits get erased instantly, and anyone caught fighting Takaba while he's confident risks dying in waves that don't even feel real. Now let's talk about Charles Bernard. Charles never wanted to fight anyone. He wanted to draw manga. When the industry collapses and his dream falls apart, he awakens a curse technique fueled by frustration and identity crisis. His weapon, the G War Staff, looks simple but becomes lethal fast. Once Charles draws blood from his opponent, the spear fills with ink that turns into manga panels, showing his opponent's immediate future. It shows him 1 second at first, but the duration becomes longer with more blood. This makes him incredibly dangerous in close combat. Once Charles lands a single hit, he starts dodging attacks perfectly and countering before punches even land. Anyone without overwhelming speed or pressure risks getting carved up while Charles moves ahead of time. And the more blood he spills, the better his foresight gets. That can snowball into complete control of a fight, but it has limits. Charles needs line of sight since blind spots shut his technique down. Still, against most Culling game players, Charles' precognition is more than enough to kill before they understand what's happening. In the Culling game, getting killed doesn't always mean losing to experience or raw strength. Sometimes, it just means standing too close to someone who awakened at the worst possible moment. Cursed Spirits. Okay, now moving on to Cursed Spirits in the Culling game, because dying to another sorcerer is one thing, but dying to a curse is usually way messier. Unlike reincarnated sorcerers or awakened humans, Cursed Spirits enter the Culling game as full participants once they cross into a colony. The game treats them like sorcerers, gives them points, and lets them hunt freely. Since they're born from fear and negative emotion, killing comes naturally to them, and the colonies give them a perfect feeding ground. Some of the strongest cursed spirits in the Culling game are more than capable of wiping out entire groups on their own. Kuro Urushi is a great example of how ugly this can get. Kuro Urushi is a special grade cursed spirit born from humanity's fear and disgust of cockroaches. That fear gives it a body built entirely around infestation and consumption. It controls massive swarms of cursed cockroaches, reinforced with cursed energy. These insects devour flesh in seconds, and can strip a human down to the bone almost instantly. Every time Kuro Urushi feeds, it strengthens itself and triggers parthogenesis, allowing it to produce more cockroaches and even create offspring that are identical to itself. This makes killing Kuro Urushi far harder than it sounds. Even if the parent body is destroyed, the cursed energy transfers to the child and lets it continue existing. As long as humanity keeps fearing cockroaches, Kuro Urushi can come back. Its technique, Earthen Insect Trance, floods the battlefield with flying insect curses that carry liquid sacs. When these burst, they blind and disorient the target. Vision loss alone can get a sorcerer killed in seconds inside a colony. Then there's the Festering Life Sword. This cursed weapon fires insect eggs directly into a target's body. Once inside, the eggs hatch and cursed insects burst outward from the victim. Getting hit once can be a death sentence if the sorcerer can't remove the infestation immediately. Apart from Kuro Urushi, there is also cursed Naoya, who shows how vengeance can turn a human into something far worse. After Naoya Zenin gets absolutely wrecked by the newly transformed Maki, Maki's mother finishes him off by stabbing him in the back. Because she doesn't use any cursed energy to do it, Naoya comes back as a vengeful cursed spirit instead of staying dead. Once he enters the Sakurajima colony to hunt down Maki for revenge, the game recognizes him as a participant immediately. In this new form, his projection sorcery evolves far beyond what he could do as a human. Projection sorcery works by dividing 1 second into 24 frames. Naoya presets his movements across those frames and executes them instantly. Anything his palm touches has to obey the same rule. If the target fails to match the frame sequence, they freeze for 1 second. That alone is deadly, since a frozen target can't defend themselves. As a cursed spirit, Naoya pushes this technique even further and unlocks his domain expansion, Time Cell Moon Palace. Inside the domain, the environment collapses into a black void with a fleshy path and a massive eye looming behind them. The real danger comes from the guaranteed hit effect. Instead of applying the frame rule to the whole body, the domain forces film strip-like constraints directly into the target's neck. Every single cell in their body must now follow the 24 frame rule. Any natural movement that breaks the sequence causes tiny cuts at the cellular level, and those cuts stack instantly. When Daido and Mio move inside the domain, their bodies tear themselves apart as blood erupts from countless microcuts. Daido loses his hand just by trying to swing his sword, since the domain turns normal movement into self-inflicted destruction. And once it starts, there's no real way to stop it. Time Cell Moon Palace is lethal because it attacks the body from the inside. Defense, toughness, and reflexes don't matter. If you're caught and have cursed energy, your own cells betray you the moment you try to move. In general, cursed spirits in the Culling game don't need complicated plans. Kuro Urushi overwhelms you with infestation and reproduction. Cursed Naoya erases you through precision and forced movement. Run into either one unprepared, and death comes fast, brutal, and very hard to avoid. Colonies. There's another thing that makes the Culling game especially lethal, is how these places are designed to grind sorcerers down before they even meet a strong opponent. The Culling game colonies are 10 massive areas spread across Japan, sealed off by gigantic barriers on November 1st. These barriers line up almost perfectly down the country, turning Japan into a long chain of death zones. Each colony is named after the region it covers, and once you're inside, you're trapped in a closed environment where killing other players is the whole point. The goal is simple on paper: fight, kill, earn points. In reality, surviving long enough to even understand what's happening is the real challenge. The setup alone already puts players at a disadvantage. Non-players who were caught inside the barriers at the start were given a single chance to leave. Players did not get that option. If you're already registered as a player and inside a colony, you stayed there whether you liked it or not. If you were a player outside a colony, you had to enter one or face death under the rules. From the very beginning, the game forces movement and confrontation. There is no safe waiting period and no neutral ground. Anyone who enters a colony gets greeted by a Kogane, which politely asks if they want to participate. Saying yes means becoming a player and losing the right to live a normal life. Once inside, players are randomly dropped into one of 9 preset locations. That randomness alone gets people killed fast. You might spawn near supplies and shelter, or you might appear right next to an experienced killer who already has a plan. The barriers themselves are reinforced by a binding vow based on free will. Players technically choose to participate, which lets the barriers stay absurdly strong. Kenjaku builds them using bond barriers and layers them over Tengen's pure barriers. Destroying those pure barriers is not something Jujutsu sorcerers are willing to do, so the colonies stay intact. The result is a set of sealed arenas that no one can casually break out of. For Yuji and the others, the colonies are a nightmare to navigate. They need points to add rules, but points only come from killing or convincing killers to cooperate. They have to split up, enter different colonies, and deal with whatever monsters already ruled those spaces. On top of that, the rules change mid-game. Foreign soldiers invade Japan and start abducting players. Yorozu later adds a rule that allows free entry and exit between colonies, which reshapes the entire battlefield overnight. Every adjustment makes survival more unstable. Now, let's break down the 5 specific colonies featured in the series and why each one turns into a different kind of death trap. Tokyo No. 1 Colony covers a massive portion of Tokyo, including Shinjuku and Ikebukuro. Before the game, these areas were packed with resources, and that makes them magnets for strong players. Supplies matter a lot in a prolonged deathmatch. Food, shelter, weapons, and information all gather where cities used to thrive. Ikebukuro becomes one of the main hotspots. Higuruma sets up his base in a theater, while Reggie takes over an apartment building near Kahameko Station. Both are experienced, intelligent fighters who know how to control territory. Anyone wandering into their zones without a plan risks getting judged, manipulated, or killed outright. Yuji and Megumi enter Tokyo No. 1 specifically to find Higuruma. Their goal is not just survival. They need his points to add a rule that allows players to transfer points between each other. The problem is that Higuruma has earned his points through killing. Approaching him means stepping into the territory of someone who has already accepted the game for what it is. Tokyo No. 1 shows one of the biggest colony dangers. Strong players cluster around resources, and weaker players get hunted simply for being nearby. Even walking through the wrong street can put someone on a hit list. Tokyo No. 2 Colony looks dangerous for a completely different reason. It also spans a huge part of Tokyo, but a large portion of it is ocean. That sea becomes infested with cursed spirits, which already makes survival harder for normal sorcerers. On top of that, Kashimo takes over the colony early. The ancient sorcerer eliminates 40 players within the first 12 days. He actively hunts anyone he senses, which drives the player population down fast. With so many sorcerers dead, cursed spirits start to outnumber humans, and that flips the balance of the colony. Instead of player versus player combat, it turns into constant encounters with curses. Hikari and Panda enter Tokyo No. 2 looking for Angel as part of their plan to free Gojo from the prison realm. They do not know that Angel has already left because the colony becomes overrun by cursed spirits. This highlights another colony problem. Information travels slowly and unreliably. By the time you enter a colony for a specific target, that target may already be gone or dead. Both Panda and Hikari encounter Kashimo separately and fight him. For most players, meeting Kashimo would mean instant death. The Sendai colony is where things spiral out of control the fastest. It covers almost all of Sendai City and Miyagi Prefecture. Non-players get escorted out early on, but by 6 AM on November 1st, fighting already breaks out. Within 12 days, the violence escalates far beyond what happens in Tokyo. 4 elite players dominate the colony. Drew Vloktawala controls a massive territory using Shikigami. Ryu Ishiguri boasts overwhelming curse energy output. Takako Uro manipulates space itself, and Kuro Urashi spreads infestation and death through cursed insects. None of them can easily defeat the others, so the colony hits a deadlock. This deadlock makes Sendai uniquely dangerous. Instead of quick deaths, players get stuck in prolonged warfare zones where survival depends on avoiding multiple top-tier threats at once. Civilians and weaker players die almost immediately. Even strong sorcerers risk getting caught between clashes they cannot control. Yuta Akatsu later enters Sendai to gather information and stabilize the situation. Instead, he ends up dismantling the entire power structure. He defeats Druve, Kurourashi, Uro, and Ryu one after another. Until Yuta arrives, Sendai is arguably the most lethal colony simply because of how many unstoppable threats coexist in one place. Sakurajima Colony sits south of Miyazaki and Kyushu. By November 2nd, Kagoshima City was almost completely abandoned. The environment itself plays a role here. The city borders the sea, features wide forested areas, and has the Sakurajima volcano looming in the distance. Open spaces and limited shelter makes ambushes easier and escapes harder. This colony becomes the stage for Maki's fight against cursed Naoya. Naoya returns as a vengeful spirit, and his presence alone turns the colony into a death zone. Lastly, Lake Gosho Colony, located in Iwate Prefecture, becomes important later in the game. It's centered around a large body of water and is surrounded by mountainous roads and forests. Most of the fighting happens in these narrow paths, which limit movement and make surprise attacks deadly. On December 24th, while the strongest sorcerers deal with Sukuna elsewhere, Kenjaku enters the Lake Gosho colony. His goal here is simple: eliminate the remaining players. A confused female player tries to flee after realizing how hopeless the situation has become, but Kenjaku catches and kills her almost immediately. Kenjaku also kills Iori Hazunoki with ease until Takaba appears and confronts him. Their clash plays out in bizarre ways, but it ends with Kenjaku seemingly victorious. Takaba survives because he does not kill, which lowers Kenjaku's guard. Yuta then appears and lands the killing blow as planned. Even in defeat, Kenjaku succeeds in releasing cursed spirits from Geto's body and transfers authority over the merger to Sukuna. Across all colonies, the struggle stays the same. Limited information, forced movement, resource control, and unpredictable rule changes kill sorcerers just as effectively as cursed techniques do. Yuji and his allies are constantly behind the curve by reacting instead of controlling the situation. In the Culling game, dying in a colony does not always mean losing a fair fight. It often means sprawling in the wrong place, trusting the wrong person, entering too late, or running into someone who has already accepted that survival comes at the cost of everyone else.